Coming, what? You have to like give it a second to like so I can edit it.
Mm-hmm.
Coming from South Dakota, have you ever been told to go back to your country living in Arizona?
No, normally people don't talk to me.
Have you ever thought of like going back, or is it like, because I'm from Alaska, so I'm just like, I don't want to go fucking back. Like, that's horrible.
Yeah, I've gone back to visit.
Okay.
But like, I don't think there's been a day where I'm like, man, I should really just pack it all up and head home, you know?
Because I don't know, for Alaska, it's like a $700 like round trip ticket to go. So I'm like, I could spend $700 on so many other things.
Yeah.
But even with like South Dakota, I feel like, oh, the ticket's $60. I'd rather just go get an Asian massage or something. Have you ever thought of leaving Arizona?
Oh yeah, I've left Arizona. I've lived in Louisville, and I also lived in Washington for a bit. So
How is that? I feel like those are two different places. Like physically, but culturally.
oh yeah, like Louisville, man, yeah, different culturally than Phoenix for sure. And then Washington, it's just cold, you know. That's it.
Why'd you go those two places, or was it kind of you lived there, or did you visit there?
No, I lived both of those places.
Why would you want to do that to yourself?
You know, I lived in Louisville because my girlfriend at the time got into a college there, and we both moved there. And I was like, you know, different comedy scene would be great. Chicago is down the street.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's why I moved to Louisville. And then Washington, I took a job, and I
By yourself, or were you still with this girl?
no, just me. Took a job, moved all my stuff up there, and then
So Washington, D.C., or just Washington, like the state?
State.
Okay.
Yeah, and then lived there until I got really sick, and then I moved back to Arizona. So
Have you left the U.S.?
never left the U.S.
How do you think? Because I always think it's great to have different perspectives. Like, there's some people that never want to leave their hometown. They're like, they go to college for one semester, then they come back and just go to the local community. How do you think living in these like 4 different places has like helped you write with like comedy, or just kind of like?
Oh yeah, like the more I travel for comedy and like tour in general, the more you realize that like different parts of your joke works. Like, you know, this part right here that normally is just the setup, for some reason in this town gets a big laugh, you know, like it's just like they connect with different parts of your jokes. And that's true with the whole comedy scene, where it's like they operate differently in the comedy scene. They approach comedy differently. They have different rules about comedy in every comedy scene. The more I travel, and then living in Louisville, like I remember that was a big wake up call, because I was like 4 years into comedy when I moved there. And so I thought I had an understanding, and then I moved there and none of my jokes worked. Like, I was bombing all the time.
Is that when you, because I've had that realization. Well, it's not like a heavy part. I try to like, when I write, I try to make sure my joke, this doesn't have a shelf life, and like this can work in any like demographic. But did you realize a lot of your jokes were Arizona based? Like,
no, it wasn't even that. It was just like, you know, some cities really love self-deprecating comedy. Some people love that you come in and like trash their city, and then some places don't like any of that stuff, and they're very like, oh, don't, you know, they're very sensitive about certain topics. So it's like, it's just like, you know, it's just understanding that city as a whole and being like, okay, so this is what they laugh about here, and this is what they don't laugh about here.
Yeah, a comic that came from Portland, he said he changed his name because he got blacklisted because he said like,
well, I've never had that experience.
well, I wasn't sure because like I think I've only done comedy really in Arizona.
Yeah.
Aside from just a few other like just random mic spots in like Cali, but he said like, you know, if you show up, he's like, I got blacklisted for running the light, and I was like, did you do a 20-minute set? He's like, no, I did 5 minutes when I was supposed to do 3, so they banned me, and I'm like, what?
Yeah. Well, I like, there's a story I've told on my podcast about a friend, it's a local comic here, and he was with me in another state, and he made a joke about dogs on stage. And the club is very pro-dog, and so is this comic. But they were like, no jokes ever about dogs. So like they were like,
is this like a PETA comic club? Like,
I don't know.
Okay.
You know, like I mean, we didn't know anything about this before, and then afterwards, he didn't get that gig that he was trying out for because he had a joke about dogs. And he's like,
is it just dogs, or was it an umbrella, like no animal jokes?
Just dogs.
That's
very
so
close to dogs. But you know what I mean? It's like, how do you know that until you're in that city, until you're in that club, in that, you know? So it's a lot of like, I feel like when you travel, it's a lot of that. So yeah, to kind of get back to your question of like, totally opens you up every time you travel and understand the area more, and like even just our country or like comedy as a whole, you're kind of like, okay, this is, everyone's has a different approach.
I think when traveling, the thing that throws me off is because I come like living in Anchorage, Alaska. It technically has the most diverse school in the nation because we have Hawaiians, we have a lot of people from Africa come to Alaska through the asylum program.
Okay.
Native Americans, that's a big thing that gets us there. But it was weird traveling to New Mexico and only seeing just white people. Like that was really off-putting for me, is only seeing one race like at a place. Is that how it is? Because Arizona's not that bad. I mean, we got Mexicans, so like Mexicans and white people. So that's just a random like tag on that. But what's like a random comedy rule that you were kind of shocked when you were traveling for comedy the first time?
I would say not like immediately what comes to mind is not the first time, but like when I was in Spokane, Washington, and I signed up for the open mic, and I got there and they asked me for my comedy card. And I said, what's a comedy card? And they were like, are you a real comedian? And I was like, yeah, are you like a business card? Then I found out that in Spokane, they have like laminated cards that say comedian. So then you know who to give the drink discount to, who to get on the open mic, how to like, so it's for locals only. What? So like me passing through, I was like, I don't understand what's happening here. Like it like really threw me off that I was like, oh, everyone has these in their wallet. I thought it almost sounds like a joke. Like, are you like, why does everyone have these?
That's such a big investment. It's just like, you went to an open mic, you better go to Vistaprint, better go get those business cards.
Yeah, it sounds expensive like, for 40 people.
I've waited to, because I know it's like, there's that, we talked before, like the 5-month comic is like the most motivated. I've actually held off on like doing that whole like, let me get my own website and my own package. It's like, let me just see if I do this for like, let me just see if I stick to this and diligently just write before I do all that.
Interesting.
Yeah, just because for me, it's just like, I don't have like the extra money just to do that. And I just want to like even for photography and doing this, I'm just like, let me just go get a camera that's not like $2,000. Let me just get something that's a few hundred.
Yeah.
And see if I can just stick with it.
I'm very that way. Yeah. Like when I started like doing all the tinkering on the side, like fixing random stuff, was very much like, let me get a cheap screwdriver set. Let me get a cheap like everything that I need, because like, what if I don't like this hobby, you know? And yeah, comedy is a little bit different because like I did it for a bit, and there's like it costs no money to get into because you're just going to open mics. And then at some point I decided to make it official, and I got like a business card, and I was like, I'm gonna take this serious, and the first step is a business card.
What is the difference in taking it serious from already having the work ethic of doing like getting on shows and doing the mic? So what is that like? Now I'm an LLC now, or like what was the serious shift?
Yeah, I guess for me, because I was like, I was young, so I think like the serious shift was like me actually trying to get to know the bookers and trying to get to know like the whole scene, instead of just kind of like going, yeah, every Wednesday I go here and every Thursday I go here, and but being like, okay, I'm gonna build relationships, and I'm actually gonna try to like jump into comedy. And I think maybe some of that conversation is just because like I'm such an introvert that I was like, I have to kind of make those steps to be like, okay, I'm going to be outside my box a little, and I'm going to meet these people that also do comedy or run these shows, or, you know, and get to know them.
I think that's what I was going to ask as far as your personality type, because I've noticed, and I've heard some comics say, like, every time there's like I was like, oh yeah, I accidentally offended this comic, and then they would say, oh shit, like, she'll quit in a month anyways. And I'm like, and I'm just like, and then like, I was just, cause like, once I was on the scene like a lot, and I was doing like, when people started saying hi to me, I'm like, what? That's crazy. And then like, I took a little like hiatus, and then like, they stopped saying hi to me. And then I was on the scene like very heavy, and they're like, what's up, Jeff? So I guess it's like, from my perspective, it's like, oh, you're not a quitter? I guess you could be my friend.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of that, sadly, where people are like, prove to me that you're going to be around for a while before I put any of my efforts in. And you're like, why don't you just be nice to people?
That's what I said too, but like, I don't know, I wouldn't say they might know, but at the same time, this person was like, it sounds like they've had their heart broken, like with the friendships.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you put all this, you know, you spend time, you chill, and you never see them again. It's just like, well.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't tell you how many comics have been like, could I sit and have some coffee with you and pick your brain, right? Mm-hmm. And then I sit, have coffee, give them all these ideas, and then they don't do comedy ever again. Mm-hmm. But like, I shouldn't take that as a burn. I should take that as like, yeah, they found something else that they want to do. Why should I be heartbroken that it's not this extremely hard, depressing thing? Like,
I love it's extreme. No, because I feel like for me, because I've never been in an artistic field, I feel like I did sports, and I feel like once you hang out with jocks, they're all pretty a monolith. Like they're all like
they are.
So it's just like I've always felt like that weird creative guy. That and then it's just like, you know, when Instagram started making videos, I'm like, oh, this is cool, but I never had like a community to be around. And now since I do stand up and now I'm writing, it's like inspired me. Like I kind of want to like write like a short film that's like 10 minutes or something of that degree. But it's also like, let me stick to what I don't know, stick to this. But it's like, fine, I love this, but this love has also introduced me to like a new love.
Yeah,
so it's finding out. It's like, oh my gosh, there's so much I want to do now.
Yeah, I been through the same thing of like, I always want to start these new projects, and I remind myself that, you know what, let's like, what are your goals for this year? Let's accomplish those goals. And if you have some free time, then yeah, we can start this new project or do this new thing. You know, like we were talking earlier where like I put my podcast on hiatus because there's only so much time in the day, and I wanted to focus on getting back into writing every day and back into trying new things and building a new hour and then putting together a tour and all these things that take up a lot of time. So it's okay if I put that other project on the side, but because stand-up is the most important thing to me.
Yeah, when as a reference, there's like Kevin Hart's book. It's like a real good comic perspective, just knowing how he's grinding. He was driving like 4 hours a day, not even to like do stand up, but just to kind of be around people, which was very interesting, going from like Philly to New York.
Interesting.
And then he's like, can I get up? And then his mentor's like, nah, you're not ready. And like how he quit, he went full time into comedy like just after a year, and like just quit working at like a shoe store. But like a lot of comics, you know, they catch the acting bug, and like they don't do comedy as much. And a lot of times they have a failed sitcom. It's kind of like a formula.
Yeah.
It's like, you're not a comic if you haven't had a failed sitcom before. But he says like, he just is like, all right, let me just keep the main thing. Like what got me to where I am? Stand up. So he just like did it. He just went on tour for like 2 years straight or some shit like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I remind myself all the time that all these other side things I do all started because of stand up. And when I get back, like, it comes to me where like stand-up is the thing that I want to do. I'm in complete control of it. I can do it how I want to do it. I don't have to talk to a board. I don't have other investors. I don't have, you know, there's like no other thing that's happening besides like I'm putting this together. And that even comes down to like why I book my own shows and book my own tours, is because like I'm booking it how I want to do it, and it's so less stress than hoping these other people will also help carry your career because they have no investment in it, you know? So.
No, yeah, I heard that's a big switch from being stand-up to kind of going on writing, because it's just like writing for more people, because you're not just speaking for yourself and you're representing a bigger company rather than just like you.
Yeah.
Have you ran into that issue with like writing, or have you just mainly been working? Because I know you do like your marketing. Is it mainly just been you with marketing, and then maybe just some side like TikTok? I don't want to diminish it by saying TikToks, but your gadget videos.
Like, what do you mean?
Have you like worked on like say writing for like kind of like a film or like anything like that? Wrote like something that involves people more than yourself.
Oh yeah, I would say like, you know, all of my marketing clients is a good example of finding someone else's voice, because you sit down with any type of client, right? And then they're like, I need a commercial idea, right? And maybe I'm not executing the commercial, but maybe I'm writing the commercial, and they don't like comedy, or they don't like too serious. You know, it's like you gotta like find out like what they like and talk to them and figure out their personality, and then you gotta turn that into their ad, you know? So it's like a lot of times it's like figuring that out. And then I would say I've worked on other projects with teams and stuff, but I've never been like a hired writer for like a TV show. I used to think that was my goal. I used to think that was like my end goal was to like write on Conan, but I don't think that's what I want anymore. So
What's changed that perspective on what you want?
Definitely a big wake-up call was with the podcast, interviewing people that have those jobs, and then being like, yeah, I don't want to write for 12 hours a day. You know, like I just don't want to do that for 12 hours a day. Yeah, and it seems like a lot of mental space to then go, okay, now I want to switch to my brain and do my comedy and stuff.
Well, how much of a mental shift is it to write in other people's voices, say for like commercials?
It can be a lot of mental space for sure. Yeah.
How is it the difficulty? Because I sometimes when I'm bored at open mics, I'll write. It's easier to write in somebody else's voice when I hear them on stage right then and there. So I'm just like, okay, with the flow of how this was going, if you would have just added a tag like here or there, that could have helped keep a good rhythm as far as laughs per minute if you keep track of that. But yeah, I don't know. How is it writing serious? Because I can't watch serious TV. I think there's this thing called like originals, like this Vampire Diaries that my girl watches, and I just laugh because they just there's no jokes. I'm just like, shut the hell up. Like she's like, oh gee Margaret, we're gonna take the vampire slide down to the originals, and I don't know. It's just I can't. Yeah. If it's too serious, I can't take it serious. How's it been for you writing serious commercials?
Like I find it easier than comedy, you know, because like with comedy you're either trying to like make a corporate thing funny, you know, or you're trying to like, you know, maybe it's like an indie punk rock coffee shop, but you're trying to make that funny. If it's like a comedy, you know, I think comedy marketing advertising is the hardest of them all. I think the other stuff is like, you can make things look cool in an ad, you know, and then you're just going for the cool vibe. And
well, how is it? Because I'm really big into like looking into cuts and angles and things. And a big thing that they say, I was watching this, I think it's like paint by frame. Ezra recommended it. I've watched it, I'm like, wow. And they said like your comedy visuals can be so much more enhanced if you just worked on your cuts and angles. But nowadays people are so lazy with that. So do you think like, all right, now we're going to pan to, you know, the Chuck E. Cheese sign, and then we're going to go back to the person, and then we're...
Yeah, everything's got a feel and a vibe, and then like as you're editing it, you can come back to being like, yeah, this is clunky here, or this doesn't move here, or even like a big one with like TikToks where it's like, you know, classic marketing, you have 3 seconds to get someone, right? So your video needs to explain how, why, when, where in 3 seconds. And why your product instead of someone else's. So you need to do that with TikToks because it's also the same of just scrolling through. And with TikToks, it's like when I edit my TikToks where it's like the first 3 clips are no longer than 1 second usually. I try my best to keep everything at 1 second, 1 second, 1 second.
That's a good tip.
Every second is a new angle and it's a new thing to look at. So even if like what I'm talking about isn't like the voiceover part of it isn't changing that much, the visually it's changing to keep you at least gotta get you to the 4 second mark. And if I got you to the 4 second mark, I'd probably have you for the rest of it.
Yeah, your voice is pretty soothing.
Oh,
yeah,
thank you.
Just like, you know, I was going down and I found this DS in a pile of fecal matter, and then I was like, I love where this is going. I love it every single time. But I don't know, how is it? Has there been, because you started this, and what made you want to start your own like marketing agency? I just want to make sure, marketing agency.
Yeah.
What made you want to start that?
Well, I started doing marketing for comedy, right? So I started learning marketing so I could sell more tickets and get more people to my shows. And then as I was learning that, I had friends and family that owned companies, and I was watching them get not great return from marketing companies, like hiring outside teams, spending lots of money, and not getting anything out of it, right? Like totally just blowing all that money. And so I started helping friends and family with their businesses. And then it was kind of interesting of like, oh, like every business is so different on the approach of this and that, right? So then I started learning all that. And then it just led me to, yeah, you know what? This is what I want to do during the day. I just want to help companies grow, and I want to help small companies grow. So I like working with like smaller companies that are like just trying to really get grooving. Maybe they own one coffee shop, or maybe they own 5 coffee shops and they want to get to 10 coffee shops. You know, like those type of people that are not doing the...
What is something about marketing that you were misled on before you started? It's like, because I don't want to like say like, oh, this is like, I thought it was just getting more likes on Facebook, or learning about like sales funnels or anything like that, or
I think like a misleading thing like from the beginning is that like if you really know like of how Facebook ads work, you know, there's always like the gurus and stuff that are like, I know so much about all these calculations on Facebook ads. And it's like you can know as much as you want about Facebook ads, but that doesn't mean anything if you don't know about the rest of the sales process of like going to the website and getting the clicks and converting. And like a lot of people love being like, I got you 20,000 clicks on this thing. And you're like, how many sales? And they're like, let's not talk about that. Let's talk about the 20,000 clicks. You know, it's like, so I think it was very misleading of like, man, if I could just figure out that. And then you figure out Facebook ads, and then you're like, oh, there's just way more to it of like converting a sale.
Mm-hmm. So what is the process? Because even when I get like click-throughs on like, say like a video, I look at like, I'm like, well, you know, my interview, this got like, what, 60 views, but the average watch time is like 10 minutes out of a 35-minute video.
Right.
So I'm just like, I'm not really like, I take everything with a grain of salt. When you were learning everything, was it more like you just YouTubed it, or how much were you, only because I'm like, because I want to do this probably transition too, but like with like videography and stuff, how much was it you just learning versus you just like, just let me just trial by error?
A lot of trial by error. And I worked with I had one mom and pop that I was working with that let me, all with like a small budget, they're like, okay, $500 a month, do whatever you want, right? And so I could run any kind of Facebook ad I wanted, anytime a YouTube ad. So I could literally learn how to do that, and really on a tight budget. And then, you know, after you got comfortable with that, it's like I started working with like large companies that have large budgets of spending, and being like, okay, this is how we can manage this, and, you know, understanding like where to put the money. So a lot of trial and error in the beginning. And, you know, and then also I've watched every webinar. I've gone to like summits and conferences, and like, you know, heard Airbnb speak on how they built their website a certain way. You know, I did all those things, but really I think the thing that helped me the most is just doing it over and over and over. And now it's like almost like a gut feeling where I'm like, oh, I can already tell you before we even post this ad that we need to change these words or change this thing.
Have you gone niche with it? Because I heard, I was talking with someone that was giving me advice. They're like, well, you just want to make sure, like a lot of mistakes people do is that they go for really small businesses where they don't really have much margin for like profit or like disposable income. Or like, a lot of people are really shy to go to the hospital because hospital has a lot of profit. Right. To like, oh no, the chiropractors or something. So how is it for you, like do you approach them, and how is it for you as an introvert?
You know, it's so like, I like working in the coffee space. I would say it's thin margins. I would say coffee shops often don't have a lot to spend because they're not making a lot of money. You know, it's really a transaction of like, I need to spend X and I need exactly to make Y. Like there's no margin of error there. But I love coffee and I love coffee shops, and I speak at Coffee Fest 4 times a year. And
I didn't even know there was. What is Coffee Fest? Just in a quick, what is Coffee Fest?
Coffee Fest, it's a good way to, during the day, it's a conference at a convention center, and in the morning there's classes of, you know, management. I teach marketing classes, and then there's like even barista 101 classes, and there's all that stuff in the morning, and then there's also competitions to do latte art where baristas can win money. And then the floor that you're walking is a lot of like, here's coffee roasters and here's espresso machines, and you can kind of, it's good if you're opening a shop because you can go there and you can meet the person that prints your bag, you can meet the person that built your coffee roaster, you can get like information on an espresso machine all in one day. So you can kind of do that, and it's usually like a 2 to 3 day thing. But I started speaking there years ago, and I still speak there.
Is it refreshing? Not refreshing, but it's like when I meet someone, I don't let them know I'm a comic right away because I don't like the expectation of funny. It's just like, just enjoy me as a person.
Yeah.
So when you speak at conferences, it's like, well, I haven't told a joke for 60 seconds and I feel fine about it. Like,
right. Yeah. Like, and it's funny because like, I don't mean to make my talks funny, but they are, you know? So I always get that where they're like, man, I went to your thing about TikTok and it was great and you're hilarious. And I'm like, huh, you know, like, all right. But then now I do stand up at Coffee Fest too. I normally do teaching classes, and then they'll have after parties, and I'll do stand up at some of the after parties and stuff like that. So like a lot of people know that I'm a comic there, and it's actually really good for comedy because like you're the only comedian that they're gonna meet all weekend. They're meeting other baristas and other marketing companies and other whatever, right? Like there's tons of everything. Mm-hmm. And then they're like, oh, that guy was a comic. Like, so they're like, yeah, what's your Instagram? You know, following you and stuff like that. So like I think the payoff is really nice to kind of like, I think comics should niche down of like find a thing you're very into and just be in that world. And then I don't know how many gigs I've gotten from coffee.
When you say niche down, are you saying like niche down with kind of like your act, or niche? Because I've known people that only talk about like one thing. It's just kind of like, come on, let's just make some other jokes. But are you saying niche down like professional? I don't know. Yeah, can you break down niche down?
I mean niche down like the space you're spending time in, like outside of the comedy club or open mics. You know, like 2 things people know about me. I love coffee. I speak at Coffee Fest. People know me for coffee. And people also know now that I repair retro handheld or retro gaming systems. Yeah, those are 2 like very distinct things, right? But I just leaned into those, you know? Like I made a whole TikTok repairing game systems, and then I also, you know, go and speak at Coffee Fest. So I'm spending time in these spaces and I'm meeting people in those spaces. And at Coffee Fest, I'm the only comedian. So if someone's trying to have an event and they need an MC, I'm top of mind. They're like, he knows coffee and he's funny, he can MC this event. Or he could, you know, do an hour of stand-up after the competition. Or, you know, like I'm just getting gigs from being in a place I want to be. And so I think comics should niche down of like spending time in their thing and just being in that community. Niching down on your act. I stay away from giving people advice on like their act because like I've been told, oh, I should do stand up this way or that way.
Well, it's not that, but
it's all over the place, you know.
And I just noticed because I've talked with other people about doing longer sets, and I've never, the most I've done is like 10 minutes, but when you do like 20 minutes, it really, you have to be exposes you even more.
Yeah.
So, because I've seen some people like, and they get more opportunities to headline, and then like say they're doing like 20 minutes. I'm like, that's awesome. But it's just more noticeable like, oh, this is like just your 5-minute bit just extended into 20 minutes because it's all on the same thing. Because like, oh, this is cool talking about like you're a klutz, but it's like, all right, 20 minutes of a klutz. Let's go.
Yeah.
Oh no, but yeah, no, I don't do that because I like what I said. Like the more, like when I give someone advice on comedy, that's just me wanting them to be more like me. How is it for you going from like doing your first half hour to an hour? How was that stretch?
Man, I booked things saying I could do 30 when I really had 21 minutes.
Exactly.
Yeah, like, and so I remember those vividly. I remember not having enough time and trying to stretch things from 20 minutes to 30 minutes and how that's crazy. And then I feel like if you can do 45, you can do an hour. I feel like an hour and 45 minutes and an hour are like the same, but there's something weird that happens from 10, 20 to 30 where you're just like, you gotta find the footing and the timing. And, I always think of comedy like musically, where it's like you have a rhythm happening for so long and you do that for 10 minutes, you gotta change it to some other kind of rhythm for the next 10 minutes, and then the other rhythm's gotta happen for the next 10 minutes. Because if you have the same setup and punchline for your whole half hour, maybe 20 minutes in, everyone knows what the punchline's going to be. They're like caught on to your math that you're doing.
Mm-hmm. That's a good. Yeah, it's interesting. That's interesting. I also think it's like the crowd. I don't know if you've run into like your 45 minutes turns into 33 minutes, where it's just like
yeah, where you're like, okay, you're not gonna, usually I hold here for a minute for a laugh, but
yeah. Doing those open mics, I just learned to like kind of like I wait for like a millisecond. If I don't hear nothing, just like I'm rolling.
Yeah. Open mics, I don't even think of laughter. I'm always like thinking of how I like it to sound, because if I go back and I listen to and I go, there's no laughter, that's sad. That's depressing. I
think it's fun to like say jokes, but I've never said them out loud before. It's like, well, that had a better cadence in my mind.
Yeah.
Too choppy. Quick, kind of just rally. Ask 2 more questions to top this off. But for getting into the marketing, how is that doing it by yourself, or did you do that with your ex? Did she help you with that? Because I think it's really hard to get into comedy without like just maintaining without friends. Because I think community makes everything easier.
Yeah.
Like, how is it kind of doing those 2 things starting?
Well, you're never by yourself with marketing, because you're always marketing for a company or for someone else, unless you're marketing for yourself. Mm-hmm. But so you always have like that team, right? So you always have the business owner and their staff or whatever, and they're like, you're pitching ideas to them, and then they're giving their feedback, and that's nice because you're like learning from every job you pick up. And now with Marketing Beaver, it started with, I was running ads on the side and my friend was building websites on the side, and now we combined it into one thing, because we at one point ended up sharing so many clients, because if you want ads to work well, you have to have a website that works well. So it was a lot of back and forth, and now here we are.
So when you started, did you just reach out to a client? Like, did you waste no time? You're like, well, I don't, because I've run into a point where it's just kind of like awkward for me to like kind of sell myself to somebody, like going up to a place and asking, like, I'd love to take photography of your food for free to help you redo that, and they didn't know English, and they're like, no. And I'm like,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, there's like a few things, right? So like if you, again, Coffee Fest, I'm speaking about marketing, and none of my talks are like, hey, hire me, nothing like that. It's just like, here's the facts. Here's what you need to know about TikTok, and here's how to market coffee on TikTok. And then afterwards, people come up to you and they go, yeah, you clearly know, I would like to hire you. You know what I mean? So you just want to be an educator in your area, and you just want to be around, and if you're educating and being around, people will come to you and hire you. You don't always have to sell, but to get started, to have like a portfolio or have things to show, yeah, you do free stuff. And sometimes I see people, like, I immediately thought of like influencers and bloggers that I know, that when they started, it's hard to get, Microsoft's not calling them to be a blogger or an influencer. So they just would buy things or go do things and pretend that they got hired by that company. And they'd be like, yeah, here's me taking pictures of this hot dog from this local hot dog stand. And here's all the photos and stuff like that. And now they have something to show people where they're like, yeah, I did it for free. They're totally honest about it, but like, here's what I could do the same for you for a low cost, you know? And so it's just kind of like building your own portfolio through free, just helping people out.
Yeah, I think, it's like getting those reps in.
Yeah,
you can't expect to get paid for your first rep. Same thing with, it's kind of like the same thing with...
Yeah, you almost don't want to get paid because there's like a pressure of like, oh, this has to go well. Like if I mess it up and we both knew it was free, you're like, well.
Yeah, I've had someone, I paint for fun, and then someone actually like, can you paint me something? And let me tell you, that was the most horrible experience I've ever had. It's just, there's so much mentally, I undercharged so much, I made it too big, and then I'm just like, I should have charged, like, from the amount of time it took, I should have charged like $200, charged like $40.
Yeah, you quickly, like now when I like meet clients or have people approach about ideas, it's kind of like you're laying that out in your brain of like, okay, this is a 4-month thing and it's going to take this many hours. You're kind of like building the quote in your mind and being like, okay, and is this something I want to do? Am I passionate about this? You know? Yeah.
Well, so to top it off, do you want to tell yourself something in the future, or do you want to try to give advice to someone?
Oh, so a future self or a stranger?
Yeah, future self or a stranger.
Future self.
Okay, so you watch this in 10 years. What do you want? What do you expect, or what do you want to tell yourself?
What do I want to tell myself?
Yeah, or what is like you should not be a sack of shit by now, or like what do you want to say?
Oh, okay. Do you think I'm a sack of shit? I'm just kidding. Okay, future self, 10 years from now.
Yeah.
Did you travel to all the places you wanted to travel to? And did you stay in the moment?
Fade to black.